Hi, I'm Bruce Baker. I want to show you how I create bonsai. I've been doing this for many decades, and in particular, I've been doing a lot of work on urban yamadori, or collected yews collected from urban neighborhoods, and I've been turning them from landscape shrubs into driftwood style bonsai. For perspective here, I have a northern white cedar. Um, it's a more normal sized bonsai. Most people's collections, this would be a large tree. It's also a very old tree, by the way. It's well over 250 years old. Um, but anyway, this is here for comparison, and what we're going to do is take you through the collection and styling process over a dozen years for Goliath. This tree, uh, there was no deadwood on it. It was all alive. Multiple stems coming out from the base. You can see what's going on down in this lower area. All these shapes, and I'll talk about how I got there. But typically anything that's rounded like this, anything with the curved hollow at the base of this tree is actually, it was there. It was part of the tree. It was a real collar around a branch. So for example, right here, there was a huge branch coming out in this direction. So when you get a tree like this out of the ground and it's all alive, there's no dead wood on it at all. You've got your fine roots, you plant it into a planter box or whatever you do with it. You have to wait. And part of that more than a decade that I've waited to actually style this tree, what happens is the vascular system finds the branches that it's able to feed, and it sloughs off everything else. Areas of the tree will die. So most of what you see now as dead wood was alive. Well, it was all alive. Most of it died back on its own. Now, the only way to discover that was to carefully examine the bark and to check for the living tissue. But what typically happens with yews is, over time, they die back. They will form very distinctive vascular lines. Now, this is a small one, and I think this one might disappear over time. Most of the living part of this tree is on this side of the tree, and there's a very wide band of living bark here. So that's the first thing. So what do you do when you have a tree that is huge, or even if it's not huge, even if it's just a small tree, what do you do to make it look right? And so over time I kind of developed an approach, and the approach is really to attempt to reveal what's already there. Two parts: reveal and enhance, and let's say even exaggerate. And the reason is that what we're doing is, when we carve, you might carve a tree that already has a dead wood. You might get a California juniper that's got beautiful dead wood, but it's got one area that looks terrible. So you might go in and just kind of clean that up and attempt to make it blend with the rest of the tree so nobody knows there was any carving done. The problem with these is any dead wood is going to be carved away. It's either going to be perfectly round and look like nothing, or it's going to be wood that you carved. So what I attempt to do is to discover what's already in the tree. Now that's going to sound crazy maybe to some people. Some people may immediately understand it. There are two ways to discover. One of them is through observation, through with your eyes. And with my eyes, I noticed the whole beginning of the styling of the whole beginning of the carving of this tree was actually right up in this area of this branch. And what I noticed was, I noticed some indentations. I followed them, and I almost got a little bit of a barber pole kind of a feeling and so I thought, well, you know, there's a little bit of a spiral there. Let's run with this. Let's see what we can do. And then in the lower area, as I said, we had all of these trunks that I knew I had to remove, and I couldn't see just cutting them off flat. So around every major trunk or branch, there is this tissue at the collar, and it's special tissue. It's extra hard, and in fact, mentioning hardness brings me to my second way of discovering what's in the tree, and that's through your fingers. It's sensation. When you're using a high-speed carving tool, you can actually feel what the areas of wood that are harder versus softer. And I'll just throw out a general rule right now: if you have a high-speed carving tool and you're moving through wood and you find a soft area, my recommendation is explore that, get rid of it, and you may reveal some kind of structure inside the tree that was already there and is actually beautiful. So that's the second way. First way is observation. The second way is tactile discovery, and then another way, which is also observation, but it's a little different than what I was talking about previously, and that is paint by numbers. Every tree has growth rings, and inside of an old yew, as you're carving, you can see these growth rings. And a tree that has grown over 100 years is going to have interesting things going on in those rings. You're going to see movement inside the trunk. You can't understand exactly why it's there. You might have a section of round trunk like this, but inside you might see some wavy movement in the lines of the growth rings. So follow the lines. It's like paint by numbers. So those are the three basic ways. You can only learn to carve by carving. So I'll talk about this. I'll talk about this a little bit. Starting with the base, I mentioned that all of these sort of circular hollow areas. If you were here and able to take a close look at the tree, maybe you will be able to take a close look at this tree one day, you'll find a series of concentric rings in the center, meaning that there was a branch there, and I've removed all traces of the branch except for the collar tissue. And then I ran with the collars, and I came up with this. So I started here. After beginning this process, I spent probably a year jumping back and forth between this area and this area, just working a couple of hours at a time, 2-3 hours, and returning to the same spots over and over again, following what I felt, what I saw, not attempting to impose my own ideas, although that does happen along the way, but just trying to explore the tree and enhance what was already there. I spent quite a bit of time in here. There was a major branch coming off in this direction, and this is another major branch that's sort of branching like this, and I had to remove a lot of wood in this area just to make sense of it. You do have to, even with a dead wood tree, even with something that is crazy, wild driftwood, you still have to observe conventions like reducing the mass as you move upward. You can call it taper, you can call it internal taper, or you can just say there's less and less mass the higher and higher I get in the tree. And that's just because that's the natural way trees look. So this was a really fun area for me to work on. In the beginning, it was another branch, and there was foliage way out here somewhere, and I thought, well, maybe the tree will move in this direction. But more and more I realized I wanted to keep the focus of the bonsai on the most interesting part of the dead wood, right up through the center of the tree. So I killed this, and I was very pleased to turn sort of a collection of sort of a sprout of different branches right here, and another one here, and it kind of reminded me a little bit of a dragon's head, and I played with it, and it wasn't 100% discovery in this area. Part of it was me imposing my own ideas. So the end result, when you do this kind of work this way, is, first of all, you have a piece of you have a bonsai that could never have existed before without your own efforts. That's exciting to me. It's something. It's some consolation for not having California junipers growing in the wild here. So let's talk about what I'm going to do here. I was talking earlier with Dean. The objective for this tree for me now is to properly frame the dead wood, and also to compact and organize the foliage. It should be much the actual foliar mass should be much smaller than it is in order to make this in ideal proportion. If you look at this tree, obviously there's a lot going on here. There's major root spread. It's an amazing vase, and then there's a movement in here that I think if I keep these branches, there's almost no place I can put them where I'm not kind of obscuring one of the most interesting parts of the tree. So as I'm just looking at proportions, if you look at all of this foliage sort of above this point, it's like there's plenty, there's plenty of volume. And then if you look at this branch in particular, one of the things you want to do is you want to establish a really great primary branch, because that's a directional indicator, and it's one of the most, in the live in the live activity of the tree, it's one of the most important things. And so this branch can actually come all the way down. If I want to have really low foliage, which I think I do, I think I'm better off positioning this branch as the primary branch. There's this almost secondary trunk, and I've got a small amount of foliage here. I've got to integrate this in, and it really can't be a branch. I can't bend the trunk part. But what I plan to do over here, I'm looking at this as almost creating like a cascade bonsai right here, with the longer element either toward the inside or toward the outside, depending on what I end up doing with this area up here. Mm-hmm. So, and this is another one of the problem areas. I don't want foliage where it is, but I'm stuck with where it's originating. So this upper branch, what I'm planning to do is I'm planning to put it here. So I need to twist it around, and it can either twist this way or it can twist the other way. But once I do that, I should be able to create a live canopy. And I would like to see this sort of dragon's head kind of formation. I'd like to see that coming sort of out of the canopy, and I'd like to see this sort of coming out of the canopy. And I don't want to see all of this, pornographic, spread eagle stuff going on. I want to hide it. I want to hide it and frame it and make it look elegant. So this can be used for back, and then there's nothing really growing off the back of the tree. So what I'm looking at is some of these secondaries are long enough and limber enough so that I can take them around behind and find a spot where I can highlight, sort of have some green visible from the front. So that's kind of where I am, and I'm going to start by just doing a little clipping down here to see if I can find anything that I think I can really use. Because again, I want to have eyes on this part of the tree, mm-hmm. and I want to frame it properly. And I think this is it's just too close. Yeah.
2 questions.
Yeah.
You said you want to for sure keep this. Is that to keep the live vein there?
It's to keep the live vein there, and it's also just because there's not a lot going on this side of the tree, and I don't think that this projection is good enough to just be its own mm-hmm. gin. And I think that with this, and I can do all the styling, and I can cut it off later. I'm not sure, but I think that if I can drape some foliage down behind and sort of around this, it will make this a better component.
See how it looks.
Yeah, so that's kind of the idea.
It's sort of the top piece, but more.
Yeah, this will be the top. This will be the apex, but I'm going to move it over in here. Okay. So I'm going to have this branch complex. There's a primary branch. It's got one really good heavy secondary that's going to go back toward the back, and then I'm going to try to flesh it out, put something in at a different level over here, bring this down so that it comes down and out some, and hopefully by doing that I can kind of mirror this kind of movement here, this angle. Whenever you have a movement and you can't think of anything better to do elsewhere in the tree, just repeat what's already there.
It has to do with rhythm.
Yeah, rhythm.
It's a little delayed, so I can't.
There's a lag.
Just a little.